89. So as recession fears continue to swirl around the U.S. economy, yet another contender has jumped into the 2024 presidential race. 8 days ago, former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson announced his bid for the White House, and he did so with an interesting splash. He is the first Republican presidential candidate to call for lead GOP candidate Donald Trump to withdraw from the race in light of Trump's arraignment last week on criminal charges involving hush money payments to a porn star and a Playboy model. Hutchinson got a lot of attention for that, but his announcement was thin on the policy ideas that will win him the GOP nomination. Thin, that is, until now. Joining me now is 2024 presidential candidate and former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson. Governor, I hope I didn't put too much pressure on you.
We'll get all the policy out in a few minutes that we can.
Yeah, I love it. It's like solve world peace in 6 minutes, right? Thank you so much for joining us. You know, Governor, you're muscling into what is expected to be a very crowded field, including poll leader for the moment, Donald Trump, former South Carolina governor and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, businessman Vivek Ramaswamy, and Perry Johnson. As a business network, we have some pressing questions our viewers need answered before any candidate gets their vote. So first, people should know that as governor, you actually built up a state tax revenue surplus of more than $2 billion, and yet your website, asa2024.com, doesn't have your ideas, if elected, to turn the nation's massive deficit into a surplus. Can you tell us here how you would do that?
Well, absolutely. And ASA 2024 is being built, so stay tuned on that. But whenever you look at the recession that's hitting everybody potentially, and we're worried about it, it's inflation, it is interest rates, it's hurting our families. What do we need to do about that? All the money that's in the system from the Inflation Reduction Act, all the money that hasn't been spent but is in the system needs to be withdrawn. That is very important to put the money pressure, to take the money pressure away, take some money out of the system, because the root problem is excessive federal spending. That way you can return to more of a market economy. That way you can stop the pressure on the Fed to raising interest rates, which is the biggest challenge we have, and pressure that we might enter a recession.
Can I just push you on withdraw the money that's been put into the system? How do you plan to withdraw that? Ask people for it back?
No. It hasn't been spent yet. Just as governor, there was millions of dollars that came into the pipeline, and it has not been spent by the states. There's money that has been authorized, but it hasn't been spent, and it hasn't even been obligated yet. And this, though, has put pressure on the system. In other words, there's more money going to be spent.
Right.
Trillions of dollars more money is going to be spent, and that's what needs to slow down from the federal level.
I'm guessing you're a cut taxes, not a raise them guy. Who would get the first tax cut in a Hutchinson presidency?
Well, the first thing is we need to have a pro-growth energy policy and a pro-growth tax policy. And so while we cut taxes significantly in Arkansas while I was governor, when you look at the federal level, let's start by not undoing the tax cuts that are set to expire that's coming up in the end of 2023. Those ought to be extended. And so the key is don't raise taxes. Let's have a pro-growth tax policy to help our economy grow, combined with a pro-energy, a pro-growth energy policy that will help us to expand our economy and build the economy in the private sector.
Well, part of the inflation that we are seeing, that markets, consumers, businesses are extremely concerned about, is energy inflation, but food inflation as well. We're getting that CPI for March number. Headline inflation supposed to cool, but expected to tick up for the core. What is your clearest answer, Governor, to bringing down inflation faster than it's coming down right now?
Well, I just gave one answer, which is take money out of the system, which takes the pressure off the inflation. Secondly, we have to improve our supply chain. We can't be dependent upon adversarial countries on supply chain that costs money. If you reduce the cost of supply chain, make it more reliable, then that will help us in our goods and our stores and help those that are struggling right now.
I want to get to the banking sector because it just, as you know, experienced sort of a near death and close miss there with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. The FDIC rushed in to ensure all bank deposits, even those over the $250,000 limit. And the Federal Reserve lent billions to banks who stepped up to that discount window that it offers in order to borrow. Do you see that as a necessity or as bailouts?
Well, I don't see it as a necessity. In fact, I see it as an error because we have to share the risk. The depositors have to make good judgments as to how much they have in a particular bank. They need to make sure they manage the deposits well. The insurance is very important, but you have to share those risks. The Federal Reserve, the FDIC moved in very quickly, which was the right thing to do with Silicon Valley Bank, but they should not have so quickly moved in to make sure that there was not any, that the federal government is covering the losses versus the assets of the bank.
Fed Chair Jay Powell has made it through a Republican administration with Donald Trump. Now he's in a Democratic administration. Both presidents had different approaches, right? I mean, Trump regularly publicly excoriated Jay Powell, while Biden has more of a hands-off approach. Which approach would you most likely take? Do you think that the Fed needs to be totally independent of a president who probably wants to see rates come down?
I think there should be an engaged discussion between the president and the Federal Reserve, just like Congress has hearings with the Federal Reserve. I think President Biden is making a mistake by saying you're totally independent, we're not going to have these conversations, or you're not going to hear from me. Absolutely, that discussion should take place, and the views of the administration are important as one factor for the Federal Reserve to consider. And so that would be my approach. I think you have to engage in those conversations.
You know, I want to bring up the issue about Donald Trump because you actually threw it down as a gauntlet on the ABC announcement that you were going to run for president. And forgive me if I'm misinterpreting this, and feel free to clarify. But when you said that the former president, should drop out of the race, you spun it not from the position of what some critics of the president say. He's not fit to serve. He's been charged with a crime. There are more charges down the road. He doesn't talk about future policy, just previous grievances. But rather, you spun it as the trial would be a sideshow and a distraction. Trump needs to be able to concentrate on his due process. Where do you actually stand on Donald Trump's ability to win the presidency?
What's most important for me is that I want to compete against Donald Trump, and I want to compete in the ballot box and not in the courtroom. And right now, all the attention's in the courtroom drama that's going to continue. I love this conversation about inflation, about overregulation, about our free market system, and that's what this campaign should be about. So let's win at the ballot box, and I, for one, do not believe that Donald Trump can win in a general election. And I don't want to lose. I think it's very important we have a change of direction in our country, and that is not going to happen if Donald Trump gets the nomination. So let's understand that. Let's get away from the distractions. I suggested one way that he withdraw. He's not going to do that. So let's have it decide the ballot box, but let's focus on the key issues that really are challenging Americans right now.
Okay. And so does that mean that you will update your website? Because when we went on it to see where you stand on each piece of the policy, we haven't even tackled health care, but so many other issues, all it is just a donation site. So I'm sure that many voters watching right now want to hear again how you feel about the Fed and about regulation, about crypto and AI regulation and all of that.
Many of these policy positions are on americastrongandfree.com that I have worked with in developing those. Those will be transferred over to the new website soon, asa2024.com. So thanks for raising that, and I assure you it will be updated.
Asa Hutchinson, and we're hoping to host all of the candidates. And so thank you very much for coming on the Claman Countdown. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Liz.
Investors are putting the pedal to the metal.